of China is that it represents the world's oldest continuous civilization. Now, if you've had a 4,000-year track record of handling all kinds of crises, there's no question that China will also handle this crisis with the United States. It's another big challenge. China has faced many challenges. It will face this one too. And I emphasize the fact that China has been the world's oldest continuous civilization because it's shocking how few Americans are aware of this. Indeed, when the US Congress set up a committee on the contest between the United States and China, they said something like, it's a committee to manage the strategic contest between the United States of America and the Chinese Communist Party. This is not a contest against a communist party. This is the contest against a 4,000-year-old civilization. And I believe that if you can persuade American policymakers to hoist that in, they will then regard this contest more carefully rather than the reckless way that it is doing so. The second strength, big strength that China has, is a very powerful motivation, psychological motivation. And the psychological motivation that China has comes from the fact that it suffered a century of humiliation from 1842, the Opium War, to 1949, when the People's Republic of China was established. Memories of that are still alive in China. So as the United States applies pressures and imposes sanctions, imposes tariffs on China, the Chinese say, well, you've done this before. We understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to dominate us, and we'll make sure that this time you don't succeed. So if you've already been through it, then the motivation for succeeding is extremely powerful. And it's actually quite shocking that many senior American policymakers are not aware of this century of humiliation and how it influences China's decision making. And of course, the third and the most obvious strength that China has is the 1.4 billion Chinese people. Now, let me put this as delicately as possible because, nowadays we live in a politically correct world. You got to be very careful when you say anything about one ethnic group versus another ethnic group, because then you're accused of being in one way or another insensitive and so on and so forth. But to put it bluntly, all those of us who work with the Chinese people know that they're remarkably hardworking, resourceful, driven, and these people have gone through a lot. And even if the contest accelerates, and even if measures are made to try and stop them, in one way or another, the Chinese people's resourcefulness will come through in any contest. And that is a powerful factor in China's favor. So what are the strengths of the United States? The United States clearly, and there's no question about this, has been the most successful and the most powerful society since human history began. Even today, the US economy is still significantly bigger than the Chinese economy, even though the US population is 1/4 that of China's. Why is that so? Now, there are many reasons that explain American dynamism, but one of them, I believe, is the fact in some ways the United States is the most Darwinian society on planet Earth. They are constantly fighting and competing with each other in all arenas. You can certainly see the political contestation daily in the political arena, where you have a no-holds-barred contest in politics. But you also see that, frankly, in the economic arena, and that's why America produces world-beating entrepreneurs who can amazingly create the world's largest corporations in very short order. You can see clearly, even Europe, which has had as good a history as the United States, cannot produce the Googles, the Amazons, the Apples. Why not? Because American society is much more Darwinian than European society. And that's a tremendous competitive advantage. And the second strength that the United States has is that if China can draw on 1.4 billion people for its economy, the US can draw on 8 billion people for its economy. And the US can attract talent from all corners of planet Earth. And even today, if you look at some of the largest corporations, including some I just mentioned, Microsoft is run by Satya Nadella, born in India. Google is run by Sundar Pichai, born in India. And I'm not quite sure exactly where Elon Musk was born, but I think it wasn't in the US, or his ancestors came from somewhere else. So you can see, therefore, that gives the United States a tremendous advantage, and the quality of entrepreneurs that the United States has is still the best in the world. And of course, the third big advantage the United States has is that it's developed a culture of innovation that is still number one in the world. Just this morning, I was taking my walk from Conrad Hotel along the seafront. When I take my walks, I listen to podcasts, and I was listening to a podcast interview that Farid Zakaria was doing with a winner of a recent Nobel Prize, a lady who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for CRISPR, the CRISPR technique. So, I mean, there's something amazing about the United States, the capacity for innovation. And earlier this year, I spent 2 weeks as a visiting fellow at UPenn, and which is one of the Ivy League universities. And if you spend even just a week or 2 weeks in an Ivy League university, you realize, oh my God, the quality of mind of the researchers is absolutely amazing. And that clearly is a major advantage that the United States has. Now, let me quickly now, in 2 minutes or less, because I'm supposed to begin my discussion with Lee, discuss the weaknesses or disadvantages that they have, that both sides have. In the case of China, by the way, there are many weaknesses. I'm just picking two randomly in some ways. One is, of course, one of the biggest disadvantages that China has accumulated is a result of its mistakes that it's made in recent years of alienating the American business community. In the past, the American business community would always act as a check or a brake when moves were taken against China in the United States. Now the American business community has stopped doing it, and this was a mistake that China made. It could have avoided, and I describe it at some length in chapter 2 of my book, Has China Won? And of course, the second disadvantage or weakness that China has is that it has a tremendous demographic problem. We all know about it. The birth rates have collapsed, and the danger that China faces, as you know, or as the cliche goes, China may get old before it gets rich. So that's going to be a handicapping factor. Although I would say also, we can discuss in the Q&A, there are ways and means that China can manage the demographic challenge. Now, very quickly, let me conclude with two disadvantages or weaknesses that I think the United States has in this contest. The first one is the one that I highlighted in the opening of my book, Has China Won? That United States has launched a contest against China without working out a comprehensive long-term strategy. And anyone who studies history knows that if you decide to go into a contest with another power and you don't have a strategy, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And I say this with some confidence because the person who gave me this insight was Henry Kissinger in a one-on-one conversation that I had with him twice in 2018 and then in 2022, a year before he died. And then the second weakness that the United States has is that it has become functionally a plutocracy. And the result of this plutocracy is that the average income of the bottom 50% in America have stagnated for several decades now. That's created a tremendous amount of alienation, especially in the white working classes, a lot of anger, and this anger explains why someone like Donald Trump may be re-elected again. And of course, if he's elected, then he'll become the number one disadvantage for the United States of America. Thank you very much.
What do you guys think? Is he correct in his analysis about China and the United States? Please leave your comment below. We would love to hear from you.
Thank you for making it this far. If you like this video, you might want to share it with a like-minded friend. Thank you, and as always, stay blessed.